Thank you very much, Mr. Katsu. Practically, you did my job. You turned this Paphos conference to the climate talking. So that was my main goal. You know that people like to talk about the weather in field, in kitchen, whatever they want to talk about it. And I would like to turn this conference to the talking on the climate, just talking. Why? Because before coming to this university, I've been focal point for climate change for this country, in Kazakhstan. So I was a member who talk about climate many years. Я хочу сказать, что да, Kyoto.
And I would like to say that yes, in Kyoto, Kyoto Protocol was signed as a legally binding protocol, and we enshrined this into legislature, the responsibility for climate change, but the result wasn't that good. Paris was a political agreement. Yes, all the countries understand that there is a global warming, and it is proven, and countries started understanding more realistically what is going on. But I feel pessimistic that we are lagging behind. We are very much behind, and 1.5 degrees is a dream that won't come true unless the mankind disappears. I would like to say that it is very important. When Mr. Tokayev became a president of Kazakhstan, he announced a carbon neutrality program. But you can announce a program, but you need to understand what it is for Kazakhstan that lives in a very cold climate. What is carbon neutrality? And this topic will be repeated again and again during the discussion. Think about how Kazakhstan can reduce energy intensive way of living in our climate. Let's discuss it in a more rational way and focus on specific region, our region. Why? This is all very simple, because globally everybody understands what is happening, that the climate change is happening. And we need just to stop thinking about national egoism. When some country would like to do this work at the expense of other countries. So we should really see what is carbon neutrality for Kazakhstan. We need to discuss it as it is discussed in an informal condition, like when we discuss it among ourselves. So welcome. UNDP adjusts our work. Let's do a family picture first. Let's go here. So photographers, let us know how we should stand, and we will take a group photo.
So we are starting our informal discussion about climate change. As I said, one of the first messages that was announced in the new conditions is carbon neutrality for Kazakhstan, and how can we achieve it? The work was started by the Ministry of Ecology, Geology and Natural Resources at a certain point, and then it was actually stuck in the economy side. So Ministry of Economy became one of the responsible parties in developing the low carbon development strategy. And I would like to give the first floor in this panel session to the Deputy Director of the Institute of Economic Research, who already raised the question, the developed strategy, actually. They published this strategy in the open access. We can actually read it and discuss it. So now it's an opportunity for public discussion of the strategy. So Kwanish, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Kanat Abdulevich. For me, it's very pleasant to speak in front of guests in Nazarbayev University, in front of young people, because if traditionally, like 30 years ago, or last 30 years, it was era of technological companies. And 30 years ago, from top 30 companies of the world, only one company was technological, if 30 years, and before others were energy companies, other companies, and so on. But now we have seven companies, which are the top leading companies in the world, and out of 10, for example, and they're technological ones. And if you don't know what you want to do in your life in the future, where to apply yourself, then probably you can find yourself in this direction, because this 30, 40 years is that mega trend that we will probably deal with climate change during this period. And as previous speakers were saying, that the world society has come to understanding that without joint actions, we will not be able to achieve a lot. And this is actually indeed threatening our humanity, our world. And we have some activities, working business model. So, for example, 20 years ago, the cost of the solar energy was 99 times higher than now. As for the electric cars on our regular roads, no one would think about it. Only golf cars were electric. Now 25% of all cars that are sold, for example, in Japan, they are electricity cars. So we already have these opportunities how to reduce our emissions for 50%. The other 50% we still don't know how to reduce, because the technologies that we have now, they are still young. We still don't know how to upscale those technologies. But probably these technologies will be developing, because venture capital is invested there, and hopefully these technologies will be developing, and in the future we'll be able to apply these technologies in the future, and the economic rationality of them will increase, so that this second 50% we will also be able to reduce, and this will allow us to achieve carbon neutrality. Do I believe we can do this? Yes. Do I think that we really will do this? I don't know, because as our colleagues mentioned, 1.5 degree is now already a dream. So probably 1.5 will be not possible. We'll probably achieve 2.7 degrees. What does it mean? That means that this massive glaciers melting, increase of the water levels in the oceans, and you all know that the largest cities are located along the coast sides. That means that it will impact the cities. Some small island states will also disappear. Tuvalu, for example, recently had published their digital map and uploaded it into the cloud, because probably by the end of this century there will be no such state and such island as Tuvalu. And that's why many governments are not very active in undertaking their steps. But Kazakhstan is very active, and by signing Paris Agreement, in which all countries committed to keeping this temperature increase to 2% and preferably 1.5%, but also under Paris Agreement, countries are recommended to develop their low-carbon development strategies. And Kazakhstan has developed its strategy, and currently it's the process of public consultation. So you can find the strategy, read it, provide your comments. And now I would like to very briefly tell you about the basic moments, what we see, how we see that Kazakhstan will be achieving its carbon neutrality. If we can open the slides now. I'm waiting for these slides, or should I do it from my computer here? Yeah, can we open this second slide, please? So you know that currently in Kazakhstan we have 351 million tons. Is it a lot compared to Kazakhstan is having not much maybe, but per capita we are on the 9th place. So we are among the 10 leaders. If it's share per GDP is 17th place. So we understand that Kazakhstan economy is energy intensive, and in order to produce $1, we have to use a lot of energy. And then there is a suggestion or proposal that we can achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. What is carbon neutrality? It doesn't mean that emissions will be completely zero. We cannot imagine an economy with no emissions at all. That means that all emissions that we will have of greenhouse gases, we will be somehow absorbing them or somehow catching them. So we know that forests, that soils, they have their absorbing capabilities. And when I was saying in the beginning that there are some technologies that allow us to reduce emissions, I was talking about carbon capture and storage technologies. When the emissions are somehow captured, somehow stored in some places, in soil, in some wells, and so on. So by 2060, we hope that in the end of the period, the total emissions will be 95 tons, but they will all be somehow captured and somehow absorbed and stored. And that means that we will have to make reduction 15% in emissions compared to 1992. And how are we planning to achieve this? You all know, as already mentioned, Kazakhstan has energy-intensive economy, and based on for example, we see the electricity, where does it come from? Around 70% of electricity comes from coal burning. And emissions from coal in production of electricity and producing heat, metallurgical industry, factories also use it. All of these emissions around coal are more than 50%. So they, to some extent, related to coal. That's why one of the main directions is reducing these emissions from fossil fuels, including coal. And here, without reducing the use of coal in the economy, unfortunately, we will not be able to achieve good, big results. That's why the highest emphasis is made on the gradual reduction of coal so that it will be less painful. Also, increasing energy efficiency if our houses are well heated, but they lose this heat then through walls, through windows, through floors. That means we are just heating the air, outside air. And now these losses in the economy in total are 60%. That means we have to increase energy efficiency and thermal modernization. And thus we will reduce demand for energy, and thus will reduce the consumption. And next is electrification, large-scale electrification of railways, for example, heating on railways and so on. So this is the first direction related to decarbonization of emissions related to fossil fuels. What is not related to fossil fuels, like production of aluminium, cement, and emissions are produced not in the process of combustion, but in the process of chemical production. For example, in order in cement to get a clinker, asbest is being burnt, and then we have CO2. So if we change technological solutions, for example, we have ash or some other materials that can be used to replace clinker. And in metallurgy, there is, for example, such technologies that allow us to reduce emissions by changing technological processes. Yes, so far they're very expensive, but they are needed. And in order to apply them, you will have to change the whole production line in your factory, but it's needed. And if we approach it gradually, that will be possible. Another direction is agriculture, especially animal husbandry, like livestock. And you know that everywhere in the world, people are saying, well, let's give up meat, for example, because it's harmful for the economy and so on. We understand that during the fermentation process, methane is produced, especially it relates to cows. So emissions from livestock is more than emissions in transportation sector. And obviously we cannot force people just stop eating meat. It's not possible. First of all, this will also impact on the food security. That's why we are not imposing such limitations, but we need to move some sustainable livestock management and sustainable land management. And next important thing is the nitrogen emissions. In order to get a good yield, we use nitrogen fertilizers. And when nitrogen fertilizers are applied to soil, and because soil is tiled too deep, up to 40% of nitrogen is going back to the atmosphere. That's why sustainable land use and rehabilitation of soils is also the second direction, and also absorption and compensatory measures like planting new forests, using technologies of capture and storage. This is the third direction, and these technologies will be applied after 2035, probably, when these technologies become economically rational. And general situation, what are we planning to do in the frames of different sectors? If we consider other sectors, obviously by sectors, as I mentioned, we have main sectors like power sector. Can we open the next slide where we can see different sectors? So in the energy, like power sector, the main target is gradual reduction of power of coal generation, and also growing the generation on renewables, and nuclear energy is also green or clean energy, using gas, growing the share of renewables. Now in Kazakhstan, in the latest years, renewables are developing very quickly, and we have high potential for development of those sources. So this is what we see in power sector. Next direction is the housing sector, is buildings and thermal heating, modernization of buildings. So these buildings require thermal modernization, because 60% of all losses are because walls, windows and floors are not well isolated, let's say. And only 30% of our buildings comply with the requirements of energy efficiency class C. I already talked about agriculture, which is the third sector, and I will not stop on it. And next sector is transport. In transport, the approach is that we want to reduce the demand for using private cars. So we want to develop public transportation so that there is no need to use your private transport, so that public transport will be more convenient, will be cheaper, and more environmentally friendly. So reducing the need to use your private cars means that emissions will be reduced. And on the next slide, we can see the key direction, as we are emphasizing climate change in COP27. In the frames of COP27, we were talking about creating the fund for compensation for losses for the areas that suffered from climate change. So in the latest 30 years, we used like 357 billion tenge. Now our strategy provides for the opportunity to apply to this fund with the justified calculations. In the frames of the strategy, there are some models in accordance with which we can do calculations, and then you can apply to this fund to get some financing. That's it. Thank you for your attention. Dear colleagues, thank you, Kwanish. Yeah, I've been warned that we are behind time already. So now I will ask the next speakers to be as precise and as fast as possible. Next, we have an online speaker, Susan Osbridge. It's an expert from UNDP.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Good morning, colleagues. I'm very happy to be contributing to your event today. I'm Susanne Olbrich. I work with the United Nations Development Program headquarters in New York. And it was great to hear from previous speakers about the efforts in Kazakhstan to deal with this question. I'm happy to switch gears a bit and provide a bit of the United Nations context and support in regard to this question of how to really move towards net zero carbon future in Kazakhstan. So UNDP is offering and providing the largest support offer globally for countries to develop, revise, and also implement their nationally determined contributions, which is their national climate targets. And UNDP does that through a flagship program, which is called the Climate Promise. And as some of you will know, and I've been working with some of your previous speakers for many years now, the Climate Promise is organized along 3 core pillars. And the first one is called Scale and Speed. So this is really around governance and financing mechanisms that we help countries establish towards implementing their climate change targets. The second pillar being amplifying ambition. So this is really about the long-term net zero and climate resilient pathways. And this speaks very much to the topic that we are discussing today. The third pillar is on lasting inclusivity. And that really speaks to including key actors of societies systematically in finding these solutions. I'd like to start with just a bit of an overview of that offer, to which Kazakhstan has been a part for many years now. So the Climate Promise is really supporting 127 countries and territories under its portfolio. So it's really a massive offer. And it's great to see that Kazakhstan is part of the family. Then also UNDP is not doing this alone. UNDP is doing this together with 35 partners that are collaborating in this broad offer. And we see that with this offer, there's around 85% of all developing countries worldwide are represented under this offer. And it's also including by means of all these countries, over 25% of global GHG emissions. I'd quickly provide just a snapshot of, there's a bit of feedback if someone can mute, thank you. So I'd like to briefly touch upon a couple of the key outcomes and key results that have been achieved so far, also with the contribution of Kazakhstan being part of this broad effort. So 102 Climate Promise countries have revised and made more ambitious their nationally determined contributions. And over 90% have increased their mitigation ambition, all of them, including the energy sector, which we still will come to. 96% have increased adaptation ambition, such as in national adaptation plans. We have seen 95% of countries included gender considerations and youth considerations. And overall, we see that the nationally determined contributions after this revision have seen a higher quality with better data, more detailed costing information, and they're much more linked to national processes such as development plans and sectoral planning. Then finally, we see a number of trends emerging from different regions. So I'm now moving from the global perspective more to the regional perspective. And what we hear a lot from Europe and Central Asia is a certain focus and interest in renewable energy, in just transition towards net zero and in carbon markets. And I do know that we have more contributions also on carbon markets and Article 6 related topics later on today. So with that, moving over to the national perspective. So as mentioned, Kazakhstan has been for a number of years part of this global initiative. And under the climate promise, Kazakhstan has been updating its nationally determined contribution and climate neutral strategy of Kazakhstan. Then another big topic has been on adaptation. So the work on the climate change adaptation roadmap, and eventually also working to strengthen what we call MRV, which is monitoring, reporting, and verification of action. So these are really the three broad areas that Kazakhstan has been working on together with UNDP over the past years. And also one more specific component has been to really identify the financial requirements of Kazakhstan's adaptation roadmap. So that is to say that we have a long-standing history of working together with the government of Kazakhstan in advancing a pathway towards net zero, in advancing also work on adaptation, and then also on the MRV component to become more transparent on what is being achieved, what is there more to be achieved, are we on track, are we not? So with this topic coming to a close, I'd like to move over to the broader context of the negotiations in which this all is happening. And I know that previous speakers were already alluding to the just recently finalized climate negotiations that took place in Egypt. And yes, I think we can clearly see that the picture is pretty mixed. We can also see that clearly the global landscape has shifted a lot since last year, since we came back from the Glasgow climate change negotiations. So obviously a lot has happened during this year. And it has impacted, of course, also the climate negotiations in Egypt. So we're seeing over this year tons of evidence of climate change impacts across the globe. We are going through an ongoing pandemic. We're seeing political instability, rising food and fuel prices, and supply chain disruptions. So there's really a lot that policymakers are dealing with these days. And yet, we really need to see enhanced ambition and action. And
okay, 1 minute, Susan, please.
That is fine, thank you. So we were clearly seeing that among the topics that have been discussed during the negotiations, there was a whole range, and we already heard previous speakers talk about the recently established fund to deal with loss and damage. And clearly finance has been the elephant in the room, so to speak. And so yet, in spite of all these challenges that we see that policymakers have to deal with, it is yet more necessary than ever that climate action takes place and is being paid for. So countries must allocate sufficient expenditures towards a green economy and also international funding to be scaled up so that those countries who are at the front lines of climate change receive funding from those countries who contribute most to the problem. To conclude, there are two key topics under the negotiations under which this is being negotiated. One is the $100 billion goal that developed countries agreed a decade ago to provide annually to developing countries. And as we know, this target has not been met yet. This goal did not yet identify who would provide how much, who would receive how much, and what share would be for adaptation versus mitigation and so on. So now delegates are negotiating a new goal for climate finance. And the idea is that this new goal would include this type of information and more details, and therefore be more straightforward to achieve and implement. And the other big topic that I wanted to mention, and that is being negotiated, is a clear definition of climate finance. So while this may sound like a formality, it actually has very practical implications, as it will delineate climate finance from, for instance, development finance, and therefore make sure that climate finance is really new and additional as compared to development finance. So with that, I'll come to a close. There's definitely much more to say about that. But for the sake of time, I'll come to a close here and be looking forward to engage in a discussion afterwards. So that is to close at UNDP, of course, remains a committed partner to support Kazakhstan to move forwards toward a net zero carbon future. Thank you.
As I talked in a first stage, main role was on lawyers. A second stage of the negotiation on climate change, the main role was on the politicians. And now I think it's coming time when the scientists can say there was about how we can mitigate or adaptate to the climate change. And I would like to invite Mr. Milovan Kustic, sorry, professor of Nazarbayev University with the practical research.
First of all, thank you very much, Kanat, for the introduction. Yes, I'm a professor here. Just like to share that before I became a professor, actually I worked in oil industry for major oil companies for more than 15 years. So many of these policymakers and other people will point fingers and say, okay, oil industry is responsible for what's happening with climate change, and partially this is true. But what I like to try to do today, I like to try to convince you that maybe we are also part of the solution of the problem that we created together. So I will talk about these actions needed in Kazakhstan from very geoscience perspective. So before we heard from policy, from policymakers, from energy analysts and energy analysts. This brief introduction here is also a bit of advertise for a bigger talk that that together with Saber is my PhD student, we will give later this afternoon. So I like to start with this statement here. So, and this is something that usually we don't hear of in climate talks. This is actually motivation for climate change and research. So usually we hear about 1.5, about some climate change, disappearing some species, some minor species, frogs and so on. But what it says here, eventual human extinction. And in afternoon talk, I will try to demonstrate to you how actually all previous climate changes in the geological history were leading to extinctions of the most advanced species. So that makes us think even more how this climate change is significant. Another motivation here is a statement, actually the sentence that Haida Indian chief, so Haida is a tribe in the Pacific Ocean, said when white men came there to purchase their land. And he said, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. Having said that, I think that it's really our responsibility now to act for the benefit of our children and our grandchildren. By the way, when I was at the age of most of you here, like 18, 19, when I was entering university, this is actually the statement that Dean of Geosciences said in his welcome speech. So the next thing here is some projections and what will happen. And definitely based on all of these projections that we are seeing from IEA or any other agencies, analysts and so on, we see that overall, we are getting kind of more cleaner, but perhaps not enough. So what is needed there? Science is needed. So my problem with any projections that we are looking is that if you are looking projections from 5 or 10 years ago, none of these projections is valid anymore. And why they are not valid? Because every 5, 10 years, we have some new breakthroughs. I mean, solar cells are improving, geothermal recovery is improving. There are new technologies which are coming. And this is something that Kuanish very, very nicely said in his presentation. He said, we don't know what will come, what new technologies will be. And this is why I strongly believe in science. And science is very, very simple. So we observe the problem, we work on the problem, we make discovery, we understand that, and we come with the technology. So new technology, it's not the end. This is not the Bible. It inspires new technology again, new thinking and so on. And we are going in this circle. And I really believe that by 2040, we will have a tons of new technologies that will deflect these curves here and that we will find really good solutions. So I will just briefly now, so again, thanks to Kuanish, he covered lots of these things that I will mention here, about, which are kind of known technologies, geoscience focused. He also covered lots about agriculture, about urbanism and so on. But a few points here. At the moment, we are among the 20 largest emitters per capita in the world. So we are still better than Canada and US, but we are still pretty high. So opportunities, amazing opportunities in Kazakhstan is that we have extremely well-developed oil sector. And there is opportunity, infrastructure is there to use this CO2 for enhanced oil recovery. What is stopping us to do that? Just one thing. There is no currently regulations. There is no policy about who allows and how and how to do that. Technologies exist, people exist, knowledge exists. Just there is no regulation to implement that. Second one is carbon storage, including mineral trapping, and this is something that really kind of cool, cutting-edge science now that that Saber is working on. I mean, second part on mineral trapping. So what is missing there? Again, we don't have regulations for that. So there is interest, there is technologies developed across the world. And what is the most important? In Kazakhstan has 15 sedimentary basins. There are tons of these places where we can place very safely placed captures CO2 in the underground. So renewable energy, okay, this is something that Kazakhstan is doing pretty good. There is lots of wind farms, there is lots of solar plants. What's the problem with them? The problem is sun is shining when it likes to shine, wind is blowing when it likes to blow, right? But we need energy when it's winter and we need energy in the night. So what we can do? So sun is stronger in the summer. We need to store this energy. So what is the solution for energy storage? Again, this is geology. So, so we pump air, hydrogen, and so all solutions for energy storage actually are coming from subsurface solutions. And again, Kazakhstan, we are blessed with 15 sedimentary basins with really good opportunities there. Kuanish also mentioned uranium. So we are the biggest producer of uranium in the world, but we are not producing any energy any energy from that uranium yet. So there is, I know there are initiatives and that will happen, that we will try to produce that in the near future. Finally, geothermal. So in my talk in afternoon, I will talk more about geothermal. So my research associates actually came with a very nice scientific observations that allows us now to predict exactly where we have enhanced geothermal gradients. They are not big in size, but they are there. We have thin crust, we have elevated geothermal gradients, and we have great water discharges that it can be utilized as well. And the last but not the least, as Kuanish said, emerging and novel technologies. Lots of new things will come. So these are these 15 sedimentary basins. All of them have really great opportunities. So I like to finish that with this slide here. And I know the President Katsu, actually in his talk at the beginning, he was talking about Montreal Protocol in 1987. So now I'm not sure if he was checking my computer or somehow I was reading his mind, but anyhow, we are referring to same thing. So why am I referring to that? So world was in catastrophic situation only 2.5 decades ago. So scientists at this time projected that, I'm sorry about that. Okay, I really like to go back to the slide. Okay, I think it's good. That our ozone layer was growing so much and that basically in several decades, we will all disappear because of increased radiation. So what's happened in Montreal Protocol, 200 countries came together, they decided to stop production and consumption of ozone depleting chemicals, which impacted ozone layer. So here that curve there shows how ozone layer is actually recovering ever since. And basically together, scientists, politicians, policymakers, working together, save the planet, 25 years ago. We should celebrate that way more than we do this year. And I'm pretty much sure that world is again united to prevent another catastrophe related to climate change. So, thank you very much.
The question will be later. All speakers, please be here. So, and last but not least, I would like to give the floor to Svetlana Mogiluk from United Expert of the UNDP. Svetlana, you have 5 minutes, 7 minutes around.
Distinguished conference participants, thank you for this opportunity to speak at the conference. Can you see my presentation now? Yes, we can see it very well. Let me introduce myself. I am a chairwoman of the Environmental Forum of Kazakhstan. This is a network of non-governmental organizations, and I'm a coordinator of an international network, Central Asia on Climate. And I would like to tell you what work we have done in preparing to the COP27
in order to represent the position of NGOs to a wider circle of people so that we could impact the development of the low carbon development in Kazakhstan as well. And although my presentation is related to Central Asia in general, it is fully relevant to our country. I'd like to also note the special role which National Environmental Center played in the development of this and the opportunity of our presence at COP27, so that at one of the side events we were able to present our position. I'd like to note once again that Central Asian countries is a very vulnerable region. The Aral Sea disaster is always reminding us, and also melting of the ice is one of the main resources for our drought region, is also telling us that we need to actively do something in order to reduce this climate change consequences. But we have to also admit that the government is quite slow in this, in reducing the consequences in adaptation to climate change, and usually they are led by the positions and opinion of large corporations, which is preventing us to achieving low carbon development. Especially Kazakhstan has to revise and adopt more ambitious targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which also relates to the strategy we were talking about today, strategy for low carbon development. And I would like to also address you now, dear colleagues, our young colleagues, dear students, as this document is now published on a website. Please read it and provide your comments. We're also talking about the need to introduce climate criteria into public planning. For example, the indicators of performance of AKIMs, for example, and the procurement should be not just green, but climate justified. All of these measures will allow us to achieve some real steps, and public has to be more active, and all of us, we have to be more active. Also, politicians that are preparing different decisions, they should use the available mechanisms for active exchange of opinions, to collect expert opinions from society to develop their policies. We're also talking about the need for ensuring transparency and public accountability of financial resources allocated to addressing climate change challenges. We also talk about the need of ensuring not just support as to large business as it is now, but we need to use the opportunities of a small business, of households, in order to move to new energy sources, to adapt to climate change. We also encourage you to establish a more developed network. I know that UNDP is doing a lot to develop such platforms and programs, but there should be even more of them. There should be a network of extension centers for climate change adaptation to encourage to move to more climate-friendly technologies. And I'm addressing you, our youth, our students, because you will have to live with those consequences of climate change, which are unfortunately inevitable. But the faster we will start doing something and the more active we would be, the better it will be for us, because now the concept is postponing these activities until 2050. So far, we are increasing our coal generation, but at the same time, we are at the lowest levels, at the levels of the local societies. We can start to move to renewables, which will mean reducing impact and also improving adaptation. And what do we need for that? For that, we need more people to understand the climatic processes. That's why we are promoting a more active introduction of the climate change issues at all levels of education, starting from preschool, school and universities, of course. And I would like to thank UNDP for supporting the opportunity for conducting a very good conference in February on education for climate, and materials are published at our Telegram channel, and I will share this channel with you, and we are encouraging you to continue even more actively working in this direction, as we're conducting our conference now jointly with a very advanced university. What I want to pay your attention to, unfortunately, many targets that we announce in many documents, including this new concept for low carbon development, they are more declarative. We need to move more openly, more actively to particular measures, and not work with large corporations, but also small producers and individuals and small households. It will help us to solve the problem of poverty, especially fuel poverty. In rural areas, people are actually using all sorts of available fuel to somehow heat. Svetlana, you have 1 minute, please. Okay. I'm coming to conclusions. We would like to once again approach governments of Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan to consider rejecting nuclear power, and we also request our government to discontinue fossil fuel subsidies, so that we will not intensify our coal generation, but would move more to more progressive technologies of energy and heat supply. And here you can see contact details, and this is the end of my presentation. I'd like to thank the organizers once again, and I encourage the youth to be more active. Thank you. Thank you very much, Svetlana. Please don't leave us, because we will have a discussion now. If there are any questions to our speakers, please get ready. But before we start talks themselves, I would like to give the floor for comments to Saule. Saule, can you give your comments, please? Because we have a representative of a state authority here, we have NGO, we have science representatives. So this is the talk that should happen at the kitchen, in the kitchen, normally. It's working. Thank you for the given word again. Indeed, today's topic of climate change is a very relevant topic, and we have global challenges in front of us, and also real threats that force us to move to low carbon development. And as previous speakers had mentioned, Kuanish had presented his document. It's a very important document we are all expecting. And indeed, there are certain problems and challenges for our country, but nevertheless, we understand how and to what extent we have to fulfill these commitments and targets announced in our climate agenda. I'd like to note here the importance for what speakers were talking about. It was mentioned that we need to approach it on a comprehensive basis. It should be a balanced, comprehensive approach. And indeed, it's difficult because we're facing the problem that we all understand that our country is carbon intensive. And so we met once on one event, one round table with the representatives of the energy sector, and how difficult it is to us to make our decisions after hearing the considerations of the representatives of the traditional energy sector. We obviously want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and energy representatives, they say one of the richnesses of our country is coal. And we understand that, but we need to find some balanced and gradual transfer. And if we want to close all CHPs now just completely around the country, we know it's not possible. We understand where we live, even with our weather. For example, with the weather we're having currently in period, and we have to take all of this into account and make sure that it will be a balanced approach, take into account all areas, energy sector, agriculture, transport. And what I also wanted to note that we are doing some small steps in achieving our targets. It's not all bad or so bad. And the recommendations of this today's event will also be taken into account, and we will have some other meetings to solve these problems. What is the important thing I want to notice, one of the novelties of the environmental code is moving to the best available technologies in order to move to low carbon development. It's obviously very important to upgrade technological processes, and the results of the conference in Egypt. And we also understood it gradually that we need to upgrade our production facilities. There is interest of large companies and business, and this is where we face challenges. We all understand that technologies is very expensive nowadays, and trying to solve economic and environmental issues in a comprehensive manner, this is what we need to achieve. And about BAT, I'd like to note that the reform that we are announcing from 2025, and I believe it will make a significant contribution, because all large enterprises will have to upgrade their production processes with a reduction of pollution. And we are now developing the reference books on BATs, and this will be the standard where the enterprises will have to see this standard levels, thresholds on reducing the pollution substances. Another, our ambition is green finances and introduction of green technologies. Indeed, the small and medium enterprise is very important here in introducing and promoting green technologies. So I encourage all of us to discuss this, to take into account, solve these issues. And if you have any recommendations, you can always approach Ministry of Ecology. We are very open to work with different organizations in this field. Thank you, Sauli. I'd like to just note that usually some precious things should be kept. So if energy representatives think that coal is the richness of the country, let's keep it. Let's not burn it. So Ministry of Ecology can make this recommendation. Let's keep it. Let's store it, but not burn it, not use it, because we see how not effectively the coal is used now. Yeah, in the context of this peculiarity of Kazakhstan, yes, obviously, I understand it, but you can turn it a different way, or look at it from a different side, because the language we currently use, for example, Russian language, is also very rich, and we can approach it from different sides. Okay, thank you. Let's move to questions and answers. First of all, the organizers and others, please don't be too worried about the fact that we are a little bit behind the schedule. We have enough time for lunch. We can a little bit reduce the lunch, so we have time for questions and answers, if there are any, please. Actually, we're having a very surprising situation. Just yesterday, I watched news and got to know that Astana entered 5 countries in 5 cities in the world as the most polluted city. Although we don't have an industrial production in Astana, and obviously it is climatic factor because of the weather change of the inversion indicators, because it's non-mountain area and windy territory. This actually saves our city. So this inversion helps us with the wind to push the pollution out. But now inversion stopped somehow because there are not as much winds now, and this is what impacted. And now spending more than 2 times in the air of Astana may lead to different diseases. So which measures is Ministry of Ecology planning in this regards to prevent such situation? Thank you for your question. I believe this is also one of the very relevant questions, is the pollution in the cities and big towns of countries. And I already mentioned that one of the reforms is the introduction of the best available technologies at large enterprises from 2025. We are also planning to develop target indicators for the quality of environment. We're already in the process, and now the local administration bodies are doing this work jointly with the ministry. So they're developing these target indicators for the quality of environment. This will give us an opportunity to understand what is the status or situation now, and each region will have their own target indicators they will have to achieve. As for BATs, this reform will last for 10 years. So we will have it from 25 to 35, and full transition will be in 35. An important thing that we release large enterprises from the payments for emissions into the atmosphere. For example, now many enterprises say that it will be very expensive for them to upgrade their production process or technological processes. But now the support measure from the government is that they will not pay the fines for pollution, but during these 10 years, they will have to completely change their technology. I want to once again calm down the audience, is that now we feel like we are a true capital city, because Almaty was always in the among 5 most polluted cities in the world. Any more additional comments, questions? Yeah, I have not a question, but a comment or addition maybe. Indeed, the question of climate change is very relevant. And when we talk about climate, usually we consider everything in the aspect of the anthropogenic impact of human activities. So it's like industry and human activities and so on. But when we consider this, in many cases, we omit the reverse impact of the climate change on human activities. So, for example, in Kazakhstan, we have the continental climate, and we have various climate fluctuations and some anomalies that can happen in the types of temperature or precipitation and shifts in the climate norms. And this impacts on all types of livelihood and the health of people. And in regards of the human being, we are very dependent on the weather, and there is such a notion as the meteo dependency. And in addition, climate is also having its impact, and not some parts of it, but as a comprehensive impact, like temperature, wind, humidity, and other impacts. And if we talk about Astana, for example, low temperatures is one thing, but if combined with wind, it's completely different feelings. So I'd like that more attention would be paid to comprehensive impacts of climate change on the general livelihood of people, on their health, on their ability to work, on their livelihood. So not just thinking about the environment as the consequences of climate change, but human activities. Thank you. Can you introduce yourself? My name is Kamazov Azamat Maratovich, Chief of the Department of Meteorology and Geology. Yeah, we will have also a representative from Kazhydromet, Svetlana Dolgih, who will be talking about some things. But I fully agree with the need to consider the impact on human livelihoods. We all know that this is what we also face. Any other questions, please?
A professor at GSPP here at NU. I have a question for Kanat. Several universities in Central Asia have implemented carbon accounting. When is NU going to implement a comprehensive carbon accounting process so that it actually directs people and students to understand the consequences of carbon and the cost of carbon?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your question. I think, let me introduce you Gulzhan Yermekova. She is the director of the Department of Climate Change, or not climate change, Sustainable Development. And this department started this work maybe 5 or maybe 4 years ago. Yes, you just missed it. Please join this team and no problem with that. We know how many we are emitting. This is one of the reasons why we are switching from the diesel to the natural gas. What the idea to decrease the emissions from the Nazarbayev University to the city. Please talk. Yeah, and we will be very glad if you join this team because they are starting this work. Here we had Loretta she was here maybe 1 hour ago, and she know about this. So we are trying to counting this. Yeah, good. Yeah. Ну вот так мы живем в Назарбаев университете, иногда не зная, что у нас.
That's how we live in Nazarbayev University. Sometimes we don't know what's going on in the university. Thank you for your question.
About that. My question is with respect to the recent announcement last week of Kazakhstan saying that coal is a strategic item. And I'd like to know what the people here, Kwanish especially, what short-term and long-term energy transition issues will this change in the classification of coal have on decarbonization?
Well,
the coal is one of the most important emitters in our country. We all know that in my speech I told that about 70% of the power plants are coal-based power plants in Kazakhstan. So the electricity is mainly produced by coal, and the coal phase out is one of the main points of the strategy. So basically, or in COP26, the delegation of Kazakhstan there was an announcement about the shares of the coal plants in Kazakhstan. By 2030, it was about 40%. So it will be decreased from 69 to 40. And the renewables will be rise from 3% by that time, but now it's almost 5%. In 2 years, it's grows by 2 percentage points to 15%. So basically, this is our view. And by the end of the planning period till 60, it almost will be zero. So basically, well, the thing is that, all the problems we have now, yeah, it's about the long term because the question is how we can heat our homes basically now. So in terms of when your plants are very old, mostly the plants are basically built in 70s and 80s. And so the average age is almost 55 years. So basically you have to change it. And in some towns, you don't have an opportunity to change it directly now to the renewables or other stuff. So basically, from the short-term perspective, probably we have to build some coal plants, but at the same time, we have to reduce in the other regions when we have opportunity. And the one point is increasing renewables, and the second is by 2035, we have to build up the atom uranium station plant, which is basically about 2.5 giga. And by 40s, we have to build another 2.4 giga. So it's basically can be the transition to the more greener energy will be helpful.
1 minute, please.
Okay, I'd just like to make a quick comment about the coal. So when we talk about coal, we usually refer to coal which is mined on the surface, right? And then put in the plant to produce electricity and release CO2. But in science, we're looking at the coal also as a solution. And if we're looking at Araganda, lots of these coals which are close to the surface, they're going down to depth up to 3 kilometers. So as soon as depth is more than 1 kilometer, we can use actually this coal, and there are many scientists who are working on solutions for that, to use as a storage place for CO2. So this is another way to use a bit of science, a bit of creativity to mitigate the impact. I'm not saying that all CO2 can be captured, but lots of that can be captured and re-injected in a deeper coal seams. And that can extend the life of...
I like this discussion to professor from Nazarbayev University. Так, все, давайте спишем задержку на мой склероз возрастной, болячки и другое, поэтому заканчиваем.
Let's finish the discussion now. Let's continue it later. Thank you very much for a very interesting panel session. Let's have a coffee break now, and the lunch will be all on time. Thank you.